Ambassador Chenwei stood in the Great Hall of Concordia Station, looking at the faces of the alien leaders who sat in judgment. She had served Earth for 30 years, and in all that time she had never felt fear like this. Not fear for herself, but fear for what was about to happen to her people. The station hung in neutral space, a massive structure built by all the races of the Galactic Coalition. It was meant to be a symbol of unity, a place where differences could be settled with words instead of weapons. Today, it felt more like a courtroom where the verdict had already been decided. Chen had come too. Concordia expecting routine negotiations. Earth wanted to expand its humanitarian programs to help struggling colonies on the frontier. It was the kind of work humans had done for 200 years since joining the coalition. They built schools, shared farming techniques, and sent doctors to places where disease ran wild. It made them proud. It made them feel like they were making the galaxy a better place. She should have noticed the signs. The Valkyrie diplomats who usually greeted her warmly had been cold and distant. The Seth representatives had avoided her eyes. Even the Arn, who had always respected humanity's military contributions, had been strangely quiet. Now she knew why. High Chancellor Dekfer of the Valkyrie Empire stood at the central podium. His scales gleamed under the station's lights, each one a mark of his age and status. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of authority that came from ruling 1,000 worlds. The Council has reached a decision regarding the human question, he said. The words fell like stones into still water. Chen felt her heart sink. The human question. They had reduced her entire species to a problem that needed solving. For 2 centuries we have observed humanity with growing concern, Thekver continued. Your species advances too quickly. You interfere in matters that do not concern you? Your emotional nature makes you unpredictable. Your insistence on equality disrupts the natural order that has maintained peace for 10,000 years. Chen wanted to speak, to defend her people, but the rules of the council were clear. The accused did not interrupt the charges. Director Salanine of the Seth Collective spoke next. The Seth were beings of pure energy contained in crystalline forms, and their voice resonated like a chorus. Humanity's compassion is a weakness that spreads like disease. You teach other races to question their place. You encourage discontent. You make vassals believe they deserve the same rights as their masters. This cannot continue. The third voice belonged to War Primary Keth of the Arn sovereignty. The Arn were warriors, tall and fierce, with skin like stone and eyes that glowed with inner fire. We respected your fighters. We valued your courage. But now we see the truth. You do not fight for honor or territory. You fight for ideas. Abstract concepts like justice and dignity. Such things make you dangerous allies and unpredictable enemies. Thekor raised one clawed hand, and the hall fell silent. Therefore, the council decrees the following. Humanity's voting rights in the coalition are revoked. Your colonies outside the Sol system will be redistributed among the major powers for proper administration. Earth itself will accept vassal status under joint oversight. You will be given 60 days to comply. The words hit Chen like physical blows. 200 years of partnership dismissed. Humanity's freedom taken away. Their colonies stolen and divided like prizes. The alternative, Thekfor added, his voice cold, is total economic blockade and military peacekeeping operations to ensure compliance. The choice is yours. Round the hall, the representatives of 100 lesser races sat in silence. Some looked sympathetic. Others looked relieved that it was humanity facing judgment and not them. None of them spoke up. None of them defended the humans who had helped them, taught them, and stood beside them. Chen stood slowly. Every eye in the chamber turned to her. She was old now, her hair gray, her face lined with years of service. But her back was straight, and her voice was steady. "Have heard the council's decision," she said. "I understand your concerns. I understand your fears." There was surprise in the room. They had expected anger, defiance, perhaps even threats. Not understanding. "Humanity accepts your decision," Chen continued. The words seemed to echo in the vast chamber. "We will not argue. We will not plead. We will not resist. Relief washed over the alien faces. It had been easier than they thought. "We're going home," Chen said simply. "All of us." "That is acceptable," Thekavor replied, clearly pleased with himself. "A peaceful transition serves everyone's interests." Chen gathered her papers with careful, deliberate movements. She looked one last time at the council, at the leaders of the galaxy who had just made the biggest mistake of their civilization's history. "I want to be very clear," she said, her voice quiet but carrying to every corner of the hall. "When I say we're going home, I mean all of us. Every human in coalition space, every diplomat, every trader, every scientist, every teacher, every engineer, every doctor, every farmer, every single person who carries Earth in their heart, we're leaving. You are free to recall your citizens," Director Salanine said dismissively. "It changes nothing, we'll see," Chen said softly. She walked out of the great hall with her head high. Behind her, she heard the celebration beginning. The council members congratulated each other on handling the situation so well, on containing the human problem with minimal fuss. As Chen made her way to her ship, she activated her secure communicator. The message she sent was brief, just 3 words that would change everything. Send them home. Within hours, the message reached Earth. Within days, it spread to every human settlement in the galaxy. Within weeks, the exodus would begin. The Galactic Coalition had no idea what they had just done. They thought they had put humanity in its place. They thought they had solved their problem. They were wrong. Humanity wasn't going home to hide. Humanity wasn't going home to sulk or to plan revenge. Humanity was going home to show the galaxy what happened when you rejected the one species that had actually cared about making things better. The Council had wanted to see what humanity looked like without hope for the Coalition's future. They were about to find out. And in finding out, they would learn what true wrath looked like. Not the wrath of weapons or warriors. Not the wrath of anger or hatred, but the wrath of a people who would walk away from injustice and build something so much better that everyone else would see what they had lost. Chen boarded her ship and set course for Earth. She didn't look back at Concordia Station. There was nothing behind her worth seeing anymore. Everything that mattered was ahead. The first ships left within a week of Ambassador Chen's message. They came from every corner of Coalition space, converging on the territories humanity controlled. At first, the alien powers watched with satisfaction. The troublesome humans were leaving, just as they had been told to do. Marcus Webb had been an engineer on Velkari Prime for 15 years. He maintained the atmospheric processors that kept the capital city's air breathable for its billion inhabitants. When the recall order came, he didn't argue. He didn't demand explanations. He simply trained his Valkyrie assistant on the basic operations, packed his belongings, and booked passage home. "But you can't leave," his assistant Thelkor had protested. "You know systems I don't understand? The advanced calibrations, the emergency protocols, the seasonal adjustments." "You'll figure it out," Marcus had said kindly. "Or you'll hire someone else. Either way, it's not my problem anymore." "We need you," Thelkor had said, and there was real fear in his voice. Marcus had looked at his friend with sad eyes. "You should have thought of that before your government decided we were too dangerous to have rights." The same conversation happened 1,000,000 times across the galaxy. Human doctors left hospitals. Human teachers left universities. Human traders closed their businesses. Human mediators abandoned peace negotiations. Human scientists packed up their research and returned to Earth-controlled space. The Galactic Coalition had not realized how deeply humanity had woven itself into the fabric of their civilization. For 200 years, humans had gone everywhere, done everything, and helped everyone. They had done it with such quiet efficiency that no one noticed until they stopped. On Cathrel, a world in the Seth Collective, the famine that had been held back for 3 years returned with a vengeance. The human agricultural specialists who had taught the locals new farming techniques were gone. They had left instructions, but instructions were not the same as having someone there to adjust for unexpected problems. The crops failed. People went hungry. The Seth government sent urgent requests for the humans to return, offering better pay and conditions. The requests went unanswered. In the border regions between the Velkar Empire and the Arn sovereignty, small conflicts that had been simmering for decades suddenly exploded into violence. The human peacekeepers who had been mediating disputes and calming tensions were gone. Without them, old hatreds boiled over. The Arn deployed military forces to restore order. It worked, but it was expensive and brutal. The Valkyrie did the same on their side. Both empires found themselves spending resources on conflicts that humans had been preventing for free. Director? Salanine of the Seth Collective called Anne. Emergency session of the Council 6 months after the Exodus began. The chamber that had been so confident was now filled with worried faces. The economic impact is severe, Salanine reported. The energy being's voice had lost its earlier confidence. Human traders controlled 17 major trade routes. Those routes are now defunct. Human engineers maintained infrastructure on 64 worlds. That infrastructure is failing. Human medical personnel staffed hospitals on 38 planets. Those hospitals are overwhelmed. Surely we can replace them, High Chancellor Thekver said, but even he sounded uncertain. With what? War Primary Keth demanded. We told ourselves that humans were replaceable, that their skills were nothing special. We were wrong. They didn't just do work. They innovated. They improved. They shared knowledge freely that others would have hoarded. The economic losses can be managed, Dekver insisted. Give it time. We will adapt, but time made things worse, not better. The human cargo ship modifications that had made Velkari trade vessels twice as fast turned out to be far more complex than anyone realized. Without human engineers to maintain them, the ship slowed down. Trade became more expensive. Prices rose. The mining operations in Seth space that had been so profitable depended on geological surveys that only human experts seemed able to perform accurately. Without those surveys, mining became guesswork. Expensive, dangerous guesswork. Production dropped. The medical treatments that had saved billions of lives across the galaxy came with patents that humanity had never enforced. They had shared the formulas freely, trusting that doing good was more important than making profit. Now, without human researchers to continue developing new treatments, medical science stagnated. But the worst part wasn't the economic or infrastructure problems. The worst part was the silence. Humanity had sealed its borders completely. The boundary of human-controlled space, which had once been open and welcoming, now had warning beacons broadcasting a simple message. This territory is closed. All ships attempting to cross will be turned back. This is your only warning. The Valkyrie Empire sent a delegation to negotiate. The ships reached the human border and found something impossible. A barrier of some kind, invisible but impenetrable, surrounded human space. The delegation ship simply could not cross it. They fired weapons at it. Nothing. They tried to scan through it. Their instruments went dead. They sent messages. No response. After 3 days of trying, the delegation returned home with nothing but questions. What are they doing in there? Thekver demanded at the next council session. What are they building? No one had answers. Reconnaissance drones sent to investigate the border disappeared. Spy ships vanished without a trace. It was as if human space had been erased from the galaxy, leaving only a blank spot on the maps. 5 years passed. The galaxy adapted to humanity's absence, but the adaptation was painful and incomplete. The economy was smaller. Medical care was worse. Conflicts were more common. Education was less innovative. The galaxy functioned, but it functioned poorly compared to how it had been, and still. No one knew what the humans were doing. Lieutenant Viral of Velkari Intelligence became obsessed with the question. He studied every piece of data they had on human space. He analyzed the energy readings from the border. He interviewed everyone who had ever worked with humans. One night, reviewing the data for the 1,000th time, he noticed something. The energy readings from human space were increasing. Not quickly, but steadily. Whatever humans were building, it was big. Bigger than anything the Coalition had ever attempted. He brought his findings to High Chancellor Vekver. "Whatever they're doing, it's massive," Viral reported. "The energy signature suggests construction on a scale we've never seen. Multiple star systems are showing unusual activity." "Military preparations?" Vekver asked. "Unknown. But the energy levels are ... disturbing. They're doing something we don't understand." The three major powers held a secret meeting. The Seth, the Velkari, and the Arn agreed on one thing. They needed to know what humanity was planning. The silence was worse than any threat. "We must force them to communicate," War Primary Keth declared. "We send a fleet. We demand answers. We show them that they cannot simply ignore the Galactic Order." "And if they refuse?" Vekvor asked. "Then we make them understand that they are not beyond our reach," Keth replied. The decision was made. A joint fleet of 10,000 warships, the largest military force ever assembled in galactic history, would cross into human space and deliver an ultimatum: talk to us, or face the consequences. The fleet assembled at the human border. The commander sent one final message into human space. "This is the Coalition Joint Fleet. We demand immediate communication with human authorities. You have 24 hours to respond." The silence continued. 20-4 hours later, the fleet crossed the border. Every ship, all 10,000 of them, advanced into human space in perfect formation, and then one by one their signals vanished. Within 6 hours, the entire fleet had disappeared from all sensors, all communications, all tracking systems. It was as if they had never existed. Back in Coalition space, panic spread like wildfire. 10,000 ships. Gone. Not destroyed. Because there had been no distress calls, no battles, no explosions, just ... Gone. For the first time, the Galactic Coalition understood that they had made a terrible mistake. They had pushed away the one species that had wanted to be their friend, and now that species had become something else entirely, something unknown, something powerful, something that could make 10,000. Warships disappear without a trace. The galaxy held its breath and waited to see what would happen. Next, the disappearance of the Coalition. Fleet created a crisis unlike anything the galaxy had seen in thousands of years. For 3 months, the major powers demanded answers, threatened war, and sent increasingly desperate messages into the void of human space. The silence that came back was absolute. High Chancellor Vekver aged visibly during those months. He stood before the council, his scales dulled with stress, and tried to maintain order among the panicking representatives. "We must assume our forces are still alive," he insisted. "Humans have always valued life. They would not simply destroy 10,000 ships without warning. Then where are they?" Director Salanine's voice crackled with barely contained fear. "Where are our ships? Where are our crews? What have the humans done?" War Primary Keth slammed one massive fist on the table. "We should send another fleet. A bigger one. We cannot let this challenge go unanswered and lose more ships to whatever took the first fleet." The Gaver shook his head. "No, we wait. We watch. We try to understand what we're dealing with, but understanding proved impossible. The few autonomous probes that managed to penetrate the human border before being disabled sent back images that made no sense. Massive structures that seemed to defy physics. Energy patterns that looked like nothing in any database. Entire star systems that appeared to be under active reconstruction in one probe's final transmission before it went dark. Sensors detected something that caused the Council's scientists to question their instruments. A star, partially enclosed in some kind of shell structure, with energy being drawn from it in quantities that could power 1,000 worlds. "It's not possible," one Velkari scientist declared. "To build something like that would require resources and technology centuries beyond our own." They've only been isolated for 5 years, but the images didn't lie. Humanity was building something vast. Something that suggested they had made advances that should have taken lifetimes. While the Council struggled with these mysteries, something else began to happen. something that frightened the major powers even more than the disappeared fleet. Rebellions started spreading across coalition space. It began on a small mining colony in Velkar territory called Rushkar. The workers, mostly members of a vassal race called the TR, simply stopped working. They didn't riot. They didn't sabotage. They just refused to continue. "We want what the humans had," their leader announced. "Respect. Fair treatment. The right to govern ourselves." The Velkari governor threatened them with military intervention. The TRN workers responded with words that would echo across the galaxy. "Do what you want. We'd rather die free than live as your property." The governor, unwilling to massacre thousands of workers and create a public relations disaster, tried to negotiate. The workers wouldn't budge. Eventually, grudgingly, the Velkari Empire granted Reshkar limited self-governance. It was a small victory, but word spread fast. Within months, similar movements appeared on a dozen worlds. Then 100, then thousands. On Seth territory, entire populations began demanding the same rights that humans had once fought for. The Seth tried to crush the movements with economic pressure, cutting off resources and trade. The rebels responded by implementing the farming and manufacturing techniques that humans had taught them years before. Techniques they had learned but never needed while humans were there to help. In Arn space, vassal races that had served as auxiliary military forces began deserting. They didn't flee to enemy territory. They didn't attack their former masters. They simply walked away, echoing what humanity had done. Lieutenant Viral, promoted to intelligence director, presented his analysis to the council. His findings were disturbing. "We cannot find any evidence that humans are behind these rebellions," he reported. "No communications. No weapons shipments. No coordination that we can detect. The movements are organic, inspired by humanity's example, but not directed by them." "That makes no sense," Dekver protested. "Rebellions require resources, planning, leadership." "These rebellions have all of those things," Viral explained. "But they're using methods humans taught them years ago. The peaceful resistance tactics that human negotiators used in disputes, the organizational structures that human administrators set up in colonies, the philosophical arguments that human teachers shared in universities. Humanity planted seeds throughout our territories for 200 years. Now those seeds are growing, and there's nothing we can do to stop them." Director Salonine's form flickered with agitation. "So humanity is defeating us without even being here. Their absence is more damaging than their presence ever was. Worse," Voral continued, "our own populations are starting to question why we need the current system. They see these rebels succeeding with human methods. They remember how things were better when humans were here. They're asking uncomfortable questions about why we rejected the one species that actually made life better for everyone." The council chamber fell into troubled silence. They were facing an enemy they couldn't fight. An idea. A memory. A vision of how things could be different. War Primary Keth spoke. For the first time, his voice held something other than confidence. It held fear. "I fought in the border wars for 40 years. I've faced death 1,000 times. I've never been afraid of an enemy I could see and fight. But this, how do you fight an idea? How do you kill inspiration?" The rebellions continued to spread. The major powers tried everything. Military crackdowns made things worse, creating martyrs. Economic sanctions failed because the rebels used human-taught self-sufficiency methods. Propaganda was useless because people remembered the truth of how humans had behaved. The galaxy was changing, and the old powers were losing control. 10 years after humanity's departure, the situation had become critical. The Velkari Empire was fighting 17 active independence movements. The Seth Collective had lost control of 12 major worlds. The Arn sovereignty was spending half its military budget just maintaining order in territories that had been peaceful for centuries. "High Chancellor?" Dekver looked at the galactic map with tired eyes. Everywhere he looked, he saw red markers indicating unrest, rebellion, or outright secession. The ordered galaxy he had known his entire life was falling apart. "We did this to ourselves," he said quietly to Voral during a private meeting. "We thought humans were the problem. We thought removing them would restore stability. They were never the problem, Vorel replied. They were the solution. They were the glue holding together an unjust system and making it bearable. When we removed them, everyone saw the system for what it really was. Is there any word from human space? Dekber asked, though he already knew the answer. Nothing. Complete silence. They're still building, though. The energy readings are off the scale now. Whatever they're creating, it's nearly complete. They've made a decision. Against the advice of the other council members, against all diplomatic protocol, he sent a message into human space. Not an ultimatum. Not a demand. A plea. This is High Chancellor Dekfor of the Velkari Empire, speaking personally to any human authority who will listen. We made a mistake. We see that now. The galaxy is falling apart without you. Please, talk to us. Tell us what you want. Tell us how to fix this. He sent the message and waited. Days passed. Weeks. He had almost given up hope when the response came. It wasn't a message. It was an action. The border around human space opened. Not completely, but enough to allow a single ship through. And with that opening came an invitation. Broadcast on all frequencies, the Terran Assembly invites the Galactic Coalition to send one diplomatic ship to human space. Unarmed, unescorted, one ship only. We will talk. The Council quickly agreed. They had no other choice. A single diplomatic vessel was prepared, carrying representatives from all three major powers. Dekver insisted on going himself. So did Director Salanine and War Primary Keth. They had started this crisis. They would face its resolution. As the ship crossed into human space, none of them were prepared for what they would find. The first thing they saw was a world. Not just any world, but one they recognized. It had been a minor human colony 10 years ago, barely worth noticing. Now it was transformed. The entire planet gleamed with structures that seemed to grow from the ground itself. The orbital space was filled with stations and ships of designs they had never seen. And beyond it, surrounding the system's star, was the shell they had glimpsed in probe images. But seeing it directly was different. It was beautiful and terrifying, a structure so vast it made their ship seem like a grain of sand. Abide the ancestors, Thechver whispered. What have they built? They were about to find out, and nothing in their long lives had prepared them for the truth they would learn. The diplomatic ship approached the planet under careful guidance from human traffic control. High Chancellor, Bekfer pressed his face against the viewport, trying to comprehend what he was seeing. The structures below defied everything he knew about engineering. They seemed to flow rather than stand, as if they had been grown instead of built. Energy readings are impossible, the ship's pilot reported, his voice shaking. The background radiation alone suggests power generation beyond our entire empire's output. War Primary Keth stood rigid, his warrior's instincts screaming that they were in terrible danger. Yet the humans had made no threatening moves. They simply guided the ship to a landing platform with polite efficiency. Director Salanine Esp's crystalline form pulsed with nervous energy. 10 years. They've had only 10 years. This should not be possible. Landing was smooth. As the delegation emerged from their ship, they found themselves on a platform that seemed to be made of light solidified into matter. The air was perfect, the temperature ideal. Even the view was breathtaking, designed to impress. A human woman waited for them. She was old, perhaps in her 80s, with white hair and a face lined with age. But her eyes were sharp and knowing. It took Thechver a moment to recognize her. Ambassador Chen, he said, his voice hoarse. Hi, Chancellor, she replied with a slight nod. It's been a long time. Welcome to New Terra, she gestured, and the delegation followed her into a building that seemed to shift and change around them, adjusting to their presence. The walls displayed scenes from across the galaxy, somehow pulling real-time images from light years away. How? Salanine asked, unable to contain the question. That's what you're here to learn, Chen replied. But first, I imagine you want to know about your fleet. She led them to a vast chamber where, impossibly, they could see out into space. And there, in perfect formation, hung 10,000 coalition warships. intact, undamaged, just sitting in space like toys arranged by a careful child. Your crews are alive and well, Chen said. They've been in comfortable detention. We've treated them with respect, given them entertainment, education, even tourism of our outer facilities. Some of them have asked to stay, actually. They're impressed with what we've built. HFY stared at the fleet. You just captured them all? Without a fight? There was no fight to have, Chen replied simply. Your ships crossed our border? Our automated systems identified them as potentially hostile. We disabled them, transported the crews to holding facilities, and parked the ships where you see them now. The entire operation took about 6 hours. Automated systems, Keth repeated, his voice hollow. You took 10,000 warships with automated systems. Well, we didn't want to waste human time on it, Chen said. We had more important work to do. She led them deeper into the facility, and with each step, the delegation saw wonders that made their advanced civilization seem primitive. Manufacturing systems that assembled complex machinery from raw materials in seconds. Medical facilities where diseases were diagnosed and cured by devices that seemed to read the body like a book. Educational systems where knowledge could be shared directly from mind to mind. In 10 years, Director Salanine said, "How did you advance so far?" Chen smiled. You freed us from wasting time on your politics and problems. For 200 years, we spent our energy helping you, mediating your conflicts, maintaining your infrastructure, teaching your people. When you told us to leave, you gave us the greatest gift imaginable. Time, focus, purpose. She brought them to an observation deck. Before them stretched a view of the star system, and they could see the full scope of what humanity had built. The partial shell around the star was just the beginning. Factories floated in space, each one the size of a moon. Ships moved between them, designed so advanced they seemed like living things. We didn't waste our time planning revenge, Chen continued. We didn't sit and sulk about the injustice you'd done us. We asked ourselves a question. What kind of civilization do we want to be? And then we built it. Dekvor finally found his voice. You've become more powerful than all of us combined. Power was never the goal, Chen corrected. Understanding was. Progress was. Creating a society we could be proud of was. Power just happened to come along with those things. An aide approached and whispered to Chen. She nodded and turned back to the delegation. Your crews are being returned to their ships as we speak. You're free to take them home whenever you'd like. We have no interest in holding hostages just like that. Keth asked suspiciously. No demands? No conditions. What would we demand? Chen asked. An apology? What would that change? No, we have something better planned. She led them to a communications center where hundreds of humans worked at stations that seemed to respond to thought rather than touch. We're about to release something into the galaxy, Chen explained. Everything we've learned, every technological advancement, every medical breakthrough, every agricultural technique, every manufacturing process. All of it? You're sharing it? Salanine sounded shocked. Freely, not just sharing, Chen said. Broadcasting. Directly to every world in the galaxy, bypassing all government controls. Anyone who wants our technology can have it. Free. No strings attached. Dekvor felt his blood run cold. You'll destabilize everything. Our economies, our governments, our entire social order. Yes, Chen agreed. We will. Because your social order is built on scarcity, on some people having more than others, on the strong controlling the weak. We're about to make scarcity obsolete. This is an attack, Keth growled. More effective than any military assault. It's not an attack, Chen said firmly. It's an answer. You feared our unpredictability. You feared our empathy. You feared our advancement. You were right to fear those things, but not for the reasons you thought. We're not dangerous because we want to conquer you. We're dangerous because we want to free everyone. She activated a display showing the galaxy. Red dots marked every inhabited world. In approximately 1 hour, our broadcast will begin. Every person on every world will receive instructions for building medical devices, power generators, food synthesizers, and educational systems. Your governments can't stop it. Your sensors can't block it. Your militaries can't prevent it. Why? Vekaver asked desperately. Why do this? Chen looked at him with something like pity. Because 10 years ago, you told us we were too compassionate, too helpful, too interested in making everyone's lives better. You were right. Those are our defining traits. But you thought you could change that by pushing us away. Instead, you just gave us time to get better at it. You're destroying the order that has kept the galaxy stable for thousands of years, Salanine protested. No, Chen corrected. We're destroying the order that has kept the galaxy stagnant for thousands of years. There's a difference. Your stability was built on inequality, on keeping billions of beings in poverty and servitude so that a few could live in luxury. We're going to make that impossible. She turned to face them fully. Here's what you never understood about humanity. We don't want to rule the galaxy. We never did. We wanted to be part of something worth believing in. A real coalition. A real community where everyone had value and opportunity. You offered us hierarchy and control instead. So we left. And now we're offering everyone else what we always wanted. This is your wrath, Dekfar said quietly, finally understanding. Not violence. Not revenge. But this. Yes, Chen confirmed. You'll go home to your empires. You'll watch as your colonies become independent because they no longer need you. You'll see your vassal races walk away because they can survive on their own now. You'll witness the entire galactic order transform because people will have a choice for the first time in their lives. And if we resist? Keth asked. If we try to maintain control by force, Chen's expression hardened. Then you'll discover that while we're peaceful by preference, we're not helpless. We've advanced in every field, not just the ones we're sharing. Military technology included. But I don't think it will come to that. I think most of your people will welcome the change. The broadcast began exactly on schedule. Across the galaxy, on worlds beyond counting, people received humanity's gift. Knowledge, technology, freedom, the tools to build better lives for themselves. And with that broadcast, the galaxy changed forever. Not through war or conquest, but through the simple act of sharing. Humanity's wrath was complete. The first world to declare independence was Reshkar, the mining colony where the rebellions had begun. Within hours of receiving humanity's broadcast, the Terran workers had built their first power generator using the shared designs. Within days, they had food synthesizers. Within weeks, they were completely self-sufficient. When the Valkyrie Empire sent ships to reassert control, they found a world that no longer needed them. The Tiaran simply asked the warships to leave. When the ships refused, when they threatened bombardment, something unexpected happened. Human ships appeared. Not many, just 3 of them, but each one radiated power that made the Valkyrie fleet look like children's toys. A message came from the lead ship, calm and polite. The people of Reshkar have chosen independence. We will protect that choice. Please withdraw. The Valkyrie commander, remembering the 10,000 ships that had vanished, chose wisdom over pride. The fleet withdrew. Reshkar was free. It happened again on 17 other worlds within the month. Colonies declared independence. The old powers sent forces to stop them. Human ships appeared not to attack, but to stand as shields. Every time, old powers backed down. High Chancellor Thekver watched his empire crumble from his office on Valkyrie Prime. Reports flooded in daily. Worlds leaving. Resources disappearing. The economy collapsing as the old trade monopolies became. Worthless in a galaxy where anyone could manufacture. Anything were finished, he said to Intelligence Director Viral. Everything we built over thousands of years is falling apart. Not everything, Voral replied. We still have the homeworld. We still have our culture, our history, our people. We've just lost our empire. It's everything, Thekver insisted. Is it? Viral pulled up a display showing food distribution on Valkyrie Prime. Look at this. Before the human broadcast, 40% of our population lived in poverty. They couldn't afford proper food or medical care. Now, with the devices anyone can build, poverty is disappearing. Our people are healthier, better fed, better educated than ever before, but we've lost our power, Vekver said. We've lost our power over others, Voral corrected. Maybe that's not a bad thing. Similar conversations happened in the halls of power across the galaxy. The Seth Collective watched helplessly as their economic empire dissolved. The Arn sovereignty saw their military might become irrelevant in a galaxy where force no longer determined outcomes. Some leaders tried to fight the change. A Velkari admiral named Kethrel refused to accept the new reality. He assembled a fleet of loyalist ships and attacked a newly independent world called Treshva. Determined to make an example of them, the attack was brutal. Kethrel's ships bombarded cities from orbit, killing thousands. He broadcast his actions across the sector as a warning. This is what happens to those who defy the old order. The response was swift. Human warships arrived within hours, but they weren't alone. Ships from a dozen other species came with them, species that had gained their own freedom in the weeks since the broadcast. Together, they surrounded Kethrel's fleet. The human commander's message was cold and clear. You have committed war crimes. You will surrender yourselves for trial, or you will be destroyed. You have 5 minutes to decide. Thrall chose to fight. It was over in seconds. The human ships didn't even fire weapons in any traditional sense. They simply appeared around each of Kethrel's vessels, and the vessels stopped working. Power died. Weapons failed. Life support continued, but everything else shut down. The crews were transported to detention, just like the original fleet. But Kethrel himself and his senior officers were delivered to an international tribunal on Treshva, where they were tried for their crimes by representatives from multiple species. It sent a message. Old rules were truly dead. Power and violence would no longer be tolerated. There was a new order now, and it had teeth. But not all the change came through conflict. Most of it happened peacefully, naturally, as people simply chose different lives. Workers left jobs that exploited them. Colonies stopped shipping resources to distant homeworlds. Vassal races stopped serving as soldiers for wars they didn't believe in. The three major powers faced a choice: adapt or fade into irrelevance. Some chose poorly. The Seth Collective tried to maintain control through economic manipulation, cutting off former colonies from trade networks. It backfired spectacularly when those colonies simply built their own trade networks using human technology. Within a year, the Seth economy had shrunk to a fraction of its former size. Director Salanine, facing pressure from their own people, who had seen how much better life could be, resigned in disgrace. The Seth Collective fractured into dozens of independent communities, each choosing its own path forward. The Arn sovereignty tried a different approach. War Primary Keth, surprisingly, became one of the first Old Guard leaders to accept reality. He appeared before his people and gave a speech that shocked the galaxy. We were warriors, he said. We prided ourselves on strength and honor. But there is no honor in oppressing the weak. There is no strength in maintaining power through fear. The humans showed us a different kind of strength. The strength to walk away from injustice. The strength to build instead of destroy. Strength to share instead of hoard. If we are truly warriors, we will have the courage to change. The Arn sovereignty transformed itself into a voluntary defense confederation. Worlds could join or leave as they chose. The Arn military became a peacekeeping force, protecting the weak instead of conquering them. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't easy, but it was a start. The Velkar Empire had the hardest time adapting. Their entire culture was built on hierarchy and status. High Chancellor, Dekver struggled with the changes until the day his own son came to him with a proposal. Father, the younger Velkari said, our empire is dying because we're trying to hold on to something that never should have existed. But our civilization doesn't have to die with it. It can be something else, something better. Dekver looked at his son and saw hope where he had felt only despair. Slowly, painfully, he began to let go of the old ways. The Velkari Empire became the Velkari Commonwealth, a federation of equal worlds. It was smaller, humbler, but healthier than it had ever been. 5 years after humanity's broadcast, the galaxy was transformed. Thousands of worlds that had been poor were now prosperous. Billions of beings who had lived in servitude were now free. Medical advances meant people lived longer, healthier lives. Education was available to everyone. Hunger was becoming a memory. But the change wasn't just material. Something deeper had shifted in the galactic consciousness. People began to question old assumptions about how society should work. They looked at the human example and asked, why not us too? New institutions formed. True Galactic Council, where every world had an equal voice, regardless of size or power. An international court to settle disputes without violence. Scientific collaborations that made the old research efforts look tiny. Cultural exchanges that enriched everyone. And at the center of it all, neither ruling nor controlling, but simply participating as equals, was humanity. Ambassador Chen Wei, now ancient and near the end of her life, attended the inaugural session of the new Galactic Assembly. She sat in a chamber where thousands of species gathered, not as masters and servants, but as partners. The assembly elected Dekver as its first speaker, a choice that surprised many, but Chen had advocated for it. He learned she had said simply, that's what matters. In his opening speech, Dekver acknowledged the past. We made terrible mistakes. We built a galaxy on inequality and called it order. We oppressed the weak and called it stability. We feared change and called it wisdom. We were wrong about all of it. He paused, his old eyes finding Chen in the crowd, and then we made our worst mistake. We told the one species that wanted to help us, that wanted to make things better, that they were dangerous, pushed them away. We thought we were protecting our power. Instead, we were destroying our future. But humanity didn't seek revenge. They sought to build. They transformed themselves. Then they offered that transformation to everyone else. They showed us that the galaxy we had built was not the galaxy we needed. Chen stood to speak, her voice thin but clear. We didn't do this alone. Every species that chose freedom helped create this new galaxy. Every person who had the courage to try a different way contributed to this moment. Yes, we shared our technology, but you had to choose to use it. You had to choose to change. She looked around the chamber at faces from 1,000 worlds. 10 years ago, you asked what humanity wanted. We wanted this. A galaxy where everyone had a voice. Where justice meant something. Where the strong protected the weak instead of exploiting them. Where knowledge was shared, not hoarded. Where the future belonged to everyone. You thought we walked away in anger. We didn't. We walked away in disappointment. You thought we'd return with vengeance. We didn't. We returned with gifts. Because that's what you never understood about humanity. We don't want power over you. We want partnership with you. She smiled, a tired but genuine expression. That was our wrath. Not violence, but example. Not destruction, but creation. We showed you what walking away from injustice looks like. Then, we showed you what building something better looks like. The rest was your choice. You chose well. The assembly erupted in applause, but Chen barely heard it. She was thinking about a day 10 years ago, when she had stood in a different chamber and heard humanity rejected. She had been angry then, hurt, disappointed. But she had also been determined. Humanity had walked away. And in walking away, they had shown the galaxy how to walk toward something better. As the session continued, as the new Galactic Assembly began its work of building a true community of equals, Chen looked out at the future and felt satisfied. The old galaxy of empires and hierarchies was gone. In its place was something messier, more complicated but infinitely more honest. A galaxy where everyone mattered, where compassion was strength, not weakness, where the powerful served the powerless instead of ruling them. A galaxy worth believing in, and humanity. The species that had been too dangerous to be given rights had made it possible simply by refusing to accept anything less. That, Chen thought, as the voices of 1,000 worlds rose in discussion and debate and hope, was the real power humanity had always possessed. Not the ability to conquer or control, but the ability to inspire, to show what was possible, to believe that things could be better, and then make them so. The galaxy had faced humanity's wrath, and it had been transformed by it.